Hello chess fans, this is Rick from Chess to Impress with the 9th video in the series of Bobby Fischer's perfect tournament when he scored 11 points out of 11 games in the 1963-1964 US Championships. Fischer played 8 times in the US Championships and he won them all, the first one in 1957-58 at the age of 14. But the one that sticks out there is the 63-64 championships with 11 games played, 11 wins, 3.5 points ahead of Larry Evans, who finished in second place. Here is the table of that championships. Fischer on his own, far ahead of the rest. In last week's video in round 8 we saw how Fischer beat Raymond Weinstein. In round 9 he had the black pieces against Donald Byrne, and Donald Byrne finished in last place in this US Championships. With only 2.5 points, he could only muster up 5 draws and lost 6 games. Who's Donald Byrne? He was born on June 12, 1930 and passed away on April 8, 1976, much too early at the age of 45. He was one of the strongest American players during the 50s and 60s, and he was also involved in the game of the century in 1956 when he lost to 13-year-old Bobby Fischer. He was on the white side of that masterpiece. Byrne's main career was a university professor of English at Pennsylvania State University. He was an international master at chess who played for or captained 5 US Olympiad teams between 62 and 72. Byrne was a great ambassador for American chess, seemingly on good terms with players from both sides of the Iron Curtain. At the 66 Olympiad in Havana, Cuba, Bobby Fischer, a member of the Worldwide Church of God, would not compete on Saturdays. The tournament officials knew this, yet they scheduled his first game against a Soviet player on Saturday, leading to accusations and hot tempers by the US and Soviet teams and the tournament officials. Byrne's diplomacy and communication skills and the respect that all the players had for his integrity were enough to get the game rescheduled, with everyone saving face. The tournament proceeded without further incident. Host Fidel Castro, the leader of Cuba, gave Byrne a beautifully hand-carved chess set to thank him. Byrne was repeatedly asked by his teammates to be team captain because of his interpersonal acumen and his generous, helpful nature. He routinely helped all the players analyze their games during adjournments, and he repeatedly succeeded in getting the temperamental Bobby Fischer to relax and play the game, as he would tell Fischer when stress threatened his continued participation in tournaments. So Byrne seemed to be able to control the troubled genius that was Bobby Fischer. I very much like that quote, "Relax and play the game." That's what we all should do, not only Bobby Fischer. As said, Donald Byrne passed away way too soon, but he lived long enough to see Bobby Fischer become world champion in 1972. That must have been quite a thrill for him. So here they were, Byrne with the white pieces, Fischer with the black pieces. It was the 29th of December 1963, round 9 of the US Championships. And it was top-placed Fischer who had 8 out of 8 against bottom-placed Byrne. Byrne opened with the g-pawn, c5, bishop g2, knight c6, d3, g6 and e4, and now this opening has a name. We have a closed Sicilian on the board, which normally leads to long maneuvering games. Bishop g7, f4, e6. Fischer is keeping the f5 square under control. f5 is a move that white really wants to play in the closed Sicilian. Knight f3, knight ge7, castling from Donald Byrne, and rook b8. Out of the firing line of that bishop, and preparing queenside expansion. Knight bd2 developing, d6 and a4 slowing down black's actions on the queenside, making b7 b5 a little bit more difficult. Fischer castled, c3, a6, g4, preparing that f4 f5 push, and Fischer plays on the queen side with b5. Those pawns were swapped, and knight h4 again pointed at the f4 f5 push. b4 from Fischer. This bishop is a very strong piece, a monster. And Byrne decides to blunt it by playing c4, but he gives the d4 square away as a concession. Playing f5 instead, the move that white wanted to play, is not good here. After e takes f5, g takes f5, b takes c3, black has a very good position. So Byrne saw that f5 doesn't work here, so he played c4, another plan, trying to slow black down on the queen side. Fischer jumps into that square straight away, knight d4, and please note that the knight now also covers the f5 square. Fischer has 5 pieces covering the f5 square. That's how you stop counterplay by white. Very instructive. g5. Byrne has been outplayed by Fischer. Black is already better after 15 moves. Bishop d7, knight b3, queen c7. Byrne took on d4, bishop takes check, king stepped aside, and bishop back to g7, and rook b1. It looks like a very strange move, but white wants to play his bishop away without giving up the b-pawn. Rook a8, that means that now black can take over the open a file. There goes the bishop, and the b2 pawn is protected. Rook a2, queen d2, and rook e8, a waiting move, seeing what white will do. And now we see white's idea. He plays queen f2. He wants to play d2, d4, which is supported by those pieces, to fight for the dark squares. Bishop c6, and there comes that move. Take, 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 and bishop back to a8. Fischer now has his eye on the c4 and e4 pawns. Rook a1, fighting for the a file, and e5 as an in-between move, kicking the queen. If you take on e5, then d takes e5, and this pawn on g5 will also be weak. So instead of taking in this position, Byrne moved the queen back straight away without taking on e5. Fischer took on a1, rook takes, and takes on f4, wins a pawn temporarily. b3 to support the c4 pawn, knight c6, and Byrne takes his pawn back. Knight d4, black's knight is much stronger than its counterpart, and Fischer is still better here. Queen e3 from Byrne. Did he blunder a fork? Fischer played it, knight c2, picks up an exchange, right? Well, no, it doesn't. Byrne had seen this. He has queen a7, counter-attacking black's queen. Nice little tactic there. The queens were swapped, and Fischer plays his knight back to d4, attacking the b3 pawn. Rook d7, counter-attacking the d pawn. Knight takes, rook takes, and now knight c5. Black has a dangerous passed pawn, and he's also eyeing up that pawn on e4 with 3 pieces. Rook b6 to control the b pawn, b3, protecting it with the knight, king g1, and now Fischer took on e4, winning a pawn. Black is totally winning here. He was always better throughout his game. Knight f3, rook a8, rook b5, hitting the knight and hitting the pawn. And now, after long positional maneuvers, we finally have a nice tactic. Fischer played b3, b2, very nice, threatening to play rook a1 and then promoting the pawn. So you really have to take it. And what is the point of this pawn sacrifice, giving away that beautiful b pawn? This might be a good moment to put the video on pause, and you can look for yourself what is the justification of giving up that b pawn. And it is rook a1 check. The king only has 1 square, and then we see the fork, winning an exchange for black. After king e3, Fischer took that knight, Byrne took the bishop, knight takes c4, and this is an exchange and a pawn up for black. Yes, all material, all the pawns are on the king side, but this is a winning position for black. Byrne played king f4, rook a2, hitting the bishop, king g3, Knight e3, hitting the bishop again, and Byrne saves his bishop with bishop h3, but resigns after making that move. Byrne decided not to let Bobby show off his endgame technique. You and I would still sweat here to relay the point, but for a grandmaster and especially for an exceptional player like Fischer, this is simple technique. Fischer had won again, and he was now on 9 wins out of 9 games, and the perfect score was on. In round 10, the Hungarian-American grandmaster Paul Benko stood in his way, and that is what the next video is about. Hope you enjoyed this video and that you're enjoying this series. By playing through Fischer's game round after round, you get a real impression of how incredibly strong this man actually was. If you liked the video, please give it a thumbs up, please subscribe to the Chess to Impress channel, and please leave a comment. I will read them all and I will reply to them all. If you liked the video, it would be great if you could share it on social media by clicking the share button on YouTube. You can find me on Instagram, on Twitter and on Facebook. This is Rick for Chess to Impress. Thank you for watching.